we now have a quorum, so we will begin the Audit Committee meeting. And Karina, it is yours.
All right, welcome everyone to the fourth quarter Audit Committee. Daphne. So today there are 3 items on the agenda. We're going to start things off with the external audit work plan, followed by the 2014 internal audit work plan, and followed up by our fourth quarter audit status report. So I'm just going to hand things over now to Sherry Brisbane, who will kick things off for the external audit work plan.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
The Municipal Act requires that the City prepare annual consolidated financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles as established by the Public Sector Accounting Board of the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants. The Municipal Act specifically states in Section 296 that a municipality shall appoint an auditor licensed on the Public Accounting Act of 2004 who is responsible for annually auditing the accounts and transactions of the municipality and its local boards and expressing an opinion on the financial statements of these bodies based on that audit. The auditor shall be appointed for a term not to exceed 5 years. We underwent the RFP process for an external auditor in 2009, and KPMG has been appointed for 5 years. 2013 represents the final year of this 5-year term. This is the first of 2 meetings with KPMG. The second will be held in late spring after the audit is complete, at which time they will present their audit findings. So without further ado, I'll now turn things over to Mr. Matt Beddick and Mr. Tom Mennell of KPMG. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Sherry. Welcome.
Pardon me?
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I will be doing the formal presentation. With me is Senior Partner Tom Mennell, and also with me is the Engagement Manager Brendan Hall. It's our understanding that our report was distributed in advance, and so I will not read it word for word, but touch on a few highlights as we go. I would encourage any questions through the chair as we go along, if that's okay, but I also will be available following the presentation to take any additional questions. Specifically, I'd like to draw your attention to your page 1-8, where we articulate the scope of the audit. And the audit includes the audit of the consolidated financial statements of the City. As well, it includes several separate other audits, including the trust funds, the Gasworks enterprise, the library, Centre in the Square, and the 2 business improvement areas. In addition, on the audited consolidated financial statements, it does include the accounts of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, specifically the City's portion thereof on that investment. On the following page of 1-9, we do present to the committee our materiality calculations with respect to the audit, and the financial statement materiality for this year has been set at $3.5 million, and that is consistent with what it has been set before. Furthermore, we do have several lower scoping thresholds that we use for our testing purposes, as well as accumulating any audit differences that we find. On pages 10 and 11, we do identify several reporting risks that we have specific responses to in the conduct of the audit. The first being a presumed risk of management override of control, and this is for all entities, not just the City. Audit standards require that we presume that management has the ability to override controls, and therefore we have specific audit responses with respect to those, and they're identified in the box below. Beyond that, the items that are more specific to the City include the accounting for tangible capital assets, accounting for post-employment benefits. These are the post-employment health and dental benefits, as well as the WSIB benefits that the City provides, as well as the accounting for obligatory reserve funds, which in most cases is the development charges. On page 12, we do go through the other areas of audit focus, which are mostly related to the general activities of the City, really at a very high level, the revenue sources and various expenditure sources. And the last thing I will identify specifically is on page 13, which deals with the timing of our work. We've already been out and completed interim audit work, and that was in November of this year. We'll come out to do our year-end work at the end of March and through most of April, and be prepared back to report to this committee at the end of June, which is consistent with the normal calendar. So to you, Mr. Chair, that's the end of our sort of formal comments with respect to the report, but would take any questions as necessary.
Thank you. There probably are. Councillor Gazzola.
Just a couple of quick questions. On 1.8,
Yes.
you list the scope. What about our other enterprises such as water and sewer, parking, and the golf courses? How are those covered?
Those are included in we'll call it the city proper, as those are enterprises or divisions of the city itself. Those are all looped into that audit process.
Okay, so they're covered there.
Yes, that's
okay.
correct.
One of the areas that I've often wondered about is that we get huge grants from is the new gas tax.
Mm-hmm.
Do you do any audit on that, or does anyone? I know there was a time when we got huge amounts from the transportation ministry provincially, and there were auditors that came in and looked at that. Do you or anybody else do anything on the gas tax?
Yes, we do. There's an annual requirement to complete a compliance audit of the gas tax agreement, and we do that each year. It's due by the end of March, where we opine on several sections of that agreement, and most notably the financial components of the agreement.
Okay, and finally, can you just explain just a little more detail on the three aspects of materiality, just
Okay.
what they mean? So.
Sure. So materiality, that is the amount that we would say that any individual or aggregated misstatements in excess of that amount, we would say, ignoring any qualitative factors, would not be material to the financial statements. So really, in very plain terms, if there was a $3.5 million error in the financial statements, we could say that those statements are still not materially misstated, so they're not in error. The other two components, the performance materiality, really that's just a lower scoping threshold, recognizing that there could be individual misstatements in various captions or various subsections of the financial statements, and so therefore we're lowering that amount to make sure we're not losing any detection risk issues there. The third item being the audit misstatement posting threshold. So basically any audit errors or audit differences that we find in excess or really below that number, we call trivial for the purposes of the audit of the financial statements. And so therefore we don't accumulate any amounts less than $175,000. We're not saying that amounts less than that are trivial in the running of the organization of the city, for sure. But when we compare that to the financial statements of the city and the significant large balances that are on those financial statements, those would not be considered significant.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Would you add to that it's essentially for readers of the financial statements, would their observations be any different if the statements were off by $3.5 million? Is that essentially what it is?
That's exactly correct.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I'm glad for the explanation about the materiality, because I wasn't quite sure what that meant. The areas that you are auditing, that you mentioned, have we audited those in the past since you've been our consultant on staff for that?
Yes, there's been no change in the audit approach or the areas of investigation.
Okay.
And those are the significant areas. There are other smaller areas that we do touch as well.
Okay. I guess and this is because of I'm sure my lack of experience in this area. The $3.5 million materiality error, to me, and as a regular resident, would sound like a humongous amount of money to have sort of say, well, that's not of any consequence. Is that how I'm understanding that?
I think the understanding, and to the chair's point, when a reader would look at the financial statements and revenues in $350 million approximately, if those revenues were off by an amount that was less than $350 million or 1% of the total, a reader of the financial statements would not come to a different conclusion around the health or the activities of the city. And so that's what materiality means when it speaks to a financial statement presentation. Certainly we do recognize that that's a big number, and a lot more things in a lot more granular level the city is run and budgeted, and that would be the expectation. But strictly looking at the consolidated financial statements, we believe below that number a reader's judgments or decisions would be unchanged.
Okay. So once you reach that 3.5 mark, then that would raise red flags, and you'd have to delve deeper into the
Well, then we would then we would require that those errors be corrected.
Okay. Okay.
And to provide a little bit more context, the city doesn't run up against this number. Historically, the accumulated number normally has been in the couple of $100,000 range. I'm not even sure if I can recall it's been in excess of $1 million. So just to provide some bookends on that as well.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much.
And just further to that point, I think you have stated previously that, and you're alluding to that now, that any differences of opinion or strictly errors in judgment have been, for the most part, corrected, and there has you've given a clean report, and so that has never been an issue.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. There are no further questions. There is a recommendation there. Someone prepared to move that? Councillor Ioannidis, second by Councillor Gazzola. Those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. Thanks very much for being here, gentlemen. Now move to the internal audit work.
All right. I'm going to be speaking about both my internal audit plan, which I'll be requesting an approval from you today on, as well as the larger integrated service review work plan, just to put it into context. So if you recall, last year you approved a process where we prioritized all the city services for service reviews. And from that, we came up with an integrated review plan which spanned over 6 years. This included work not only of myself, but also of the service coordination and improvement managers from each of the departments. So I will be showing you that plan first, and then show you my internal audit work plan, which is a subset of that. So this is for information only. I'll just go through each of the items briefly. The first will be a comprehensive review of our community resource centers. This will be conducted by both myself and Kathleen Woodcock from CSD. Next is a comprehensive review of supply services. And this again is being led by me in consult with Catherine Dever from FCS. I will be performing a post-mortem analysis of our integrated planning or center of excellence. So this comes at the end of the 3-year term for that organization, just to see where we're at, have we met our goals, and what the future looks like for that unit. I will be performing a capacity review for the market. So this is to do with their staffing and their staffing model that they have. Ralph Thiel in INS will be, or is already conducting, an impact analysis for facilities management, and once that is complete, he will move on to do a complete process review as well. Once he's finished that, he will move on to do a risk assessment of our stormwater utility, which then may prompt other process reviews from that. Catherine Dever will be continuing her process reviews of human resources. So she's already done several this year in a number of the different sections within HR, and that will continue on through next year. She's providing a facilitation role for that. And she will also be facilitating a process review of our contracts process. So that will involve legal, supply services, and accounting. And that came out of our FCS internal services strategy, where we had comments from our fellow employees saying that the contracts process is confusing to some. So that's the overall integrated work plan. And if you see the top 4 where my name comes up against them, these also flow into my internal audit work plan. So those are the top 4 items there. I also will be doing some controls audits. The one that I've chosen for next year is on our deposit process. So this relates to any of our, any of our areas that collect cash for programs or services, and how they get that then deposited into the bank and reconciled against their revenues. And then I've got the recurring activity, which you see every year. So the physical inventory count, the cash counts of our petty cash at all of our outlying locations, and then any confidential investigations that come up as required. So I will open up now for any questions on any of those items, and then after questions are answered, we can move into the approval of the internal audit work plan.
Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thanks very much. Karina, I appreciate this overview. I'm a big picture thinker, and please forgive me, I can't recall if we've seen definitions of these different types of reviews before. There's quite a few, and I just can't recall. Is there anywhere we could go to find the breakdown of what these mean?
There isn't anywhere specific, but I could certainly send you some definitions.
That would really be helpful, and also, I guess, a sense of the timing of these. I guess that's 2014, but it would just be nice to know. Are these in any particular order of timing, or?
From my point of view, the supply services one will be going first, because we're trying to get a good chunk of the work done before Larry Gordon retires mid-year next year. Community resource centers will then start at the later part of the year. The market will go at the beginning of the year as well.
Okay. So you don't need to go through them all, but basically chunking them out would be helpful to know.
Sure, I've got a Gantt chart.
Q1, Q2, etc. would be great.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Fernandez.
Okay. Thanks, Karina. Just a couple of questions on 2-2. You talk about monitoring compliance with policy, procedures, and legislation. I'm just trying to understand, these are part of the questions that you're going to be asking through your review? So,
yes.
So the one, yeah, okay.
So it depends on the type of the review and that we're doing. So those types of things would come in the controls type audits.
Okay. A little bit I'm puzzled in terms of internal review. When a staff person is charged with assisting you or doing some of that review, is there a bias introduced to that? And how do they pull themselves away from that bias?
Yeah. The 3 individuals are the service improvement and coordination managers, and their role is really to provide that type of similar support that I provide to the corporation as a whole. So they are doing an unbiased service review. They're not attached to any one of the divisions that they are reviewing. So I would say that they are unbiased from that perspective.
Okay. When you're talking about the human resources, what components of the human resources are you reviewing? It says process, so I'm not exactly.
So, so far this year, Catherine has looked at the hiring process. They are revamping that, and they've looked at the health and safety area as well. Next year, I believe, she is looking at the driver training. We do have a retirement coming up in that area, so looking at that specifically and how that's going to go forward. I believe that's all at this point, but each section that they have, so they've got, they've got health and safety, they've got benefits, they've got a number of different transactional-based processes, and it's looking at them from start to finish. What ways can we make it more efficient? Where can we clarify expectations with the customers? That type of thing is what's involved in a process review.
Okay, but who would the customers be in human resources? That would be really our staff, right?
Yes, employees in general.
Okay. And when we look at the hiring, do we look at it in terms of both internal hiring and external hiring, relationships between family members in different departments? Do we look at that as well?
Yes, so the part that Catherine is looking at is the different hiring streams, so whether it's internal, whether it's external, the 9000 series, so they have a number of separate reviews that they're doing. The last part that you talked about, the hiring transparency piece, that would fall to me to do, and I am scheduled to do a follow-up review. I was supposed to do it this year. However, they weren't far enough along in their process review to have anything for me to really check back against. So if they're far enough along next year, then that's something that I will add in as a follow-up audit.
Okay. And I had mentioned something about succession planning in a committee meeting last week. Is that something that is part of this human resources review as well?
I don't believe it's part of what they're looking at right now.
Okay.
Would that come from the individual departments as opposed to HR? Maybe Mr. Wilmer or someone, or Mr. Chapman can copy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, HR does have a role in building the corporate programs. I believe it's in their work plan as a part of a talent management strategy to look at succession planning. So it doesn't form part of the audit process, but it is something that's on their work plan.
Okay, all right, thanks. You also mentioned that you're looking at supply services. And would that include, because I've had a lot of questions about purchasing, and now you've mentioned that Mr. Gordon is retiring, so that actually that ties in succession planning too, but certainly will you be reviewing the purchasing as well as part of the whole supply services review?
Yes.
Okay.
So it will be a comprehensive review, and we have to identify what the scope will be, but it will include things like what their processes, their policies, their org structure, their culture, customer service, those types of things. Okay. So if there's anything specific that you'd like me to look at, then by all means let me know.
Okay. No, I think it sounds like you're going to cover what my questions are geared towards, so I think that'll be fine. Great, thank you. I'll have some other questions for the other section.
Okay.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you, Mayor Zaire. Question on the community resource centers. What exactly does that include?
In terms of what will be in scope, or in terms?
Yes, what will be in scope?
Similar to the supply services, that the comprehensive reviews include pretty much everything. So we'll look at processes, policies, their org structure, their service offerings and their mandate. We'll look at their budget. We'll look at pretty much everything within their scope.
Okay, and this is just essentially our community centers?
Yes.
Okay. So within that, an interest of mine, would we see, for example, some of our bookable resources like gymnasiums, rooms, would we get the information back in terms of use, like number of bookable hours versus number of hours actually booked, that sort of thing?
Yes, we can look at utilization.
Okay, very good. And I'm not sure if it would be appropriate or not, but I think Safe and Healthy Communities Committee is also looking at, in a broader scope, sort of community resource centers. Would it be appropriate to have this report circulated to that committee as well? I don't see why not. When it returns?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, those are the only questions in that report. So there is a recommendation, though. If someone's prepared to move, that's on 2-1. Councillor Fernandez, Councillor Ioannidis. Those in favour? Opposed? That's carried. Now move to the third item.
All right. So this is the fourth quarter audit status report. And then there are 3 items within that this time. A parking review, our physical inventory count, and 1 confidential investigation. So regarding the parking audit, this was just a routine controls audit that I did, fairly simple. Basically what I did was compare the active parking transponders that our staff have compared to their payroll records to make sure that they were getting payroll deductions, because there is an implication from a taxable benefit perspective if they are getting free parking. There were 5 discrepancies found. 4 of them were explained by special circumstances, but there was one that we found where the instruction to payroll had been missed, and so we've set that up to be retroactively billed back to July when the employees started. So in general, we found that there was no material weaknesses found and that the process is deemed to be in control. Any questions on that one?
Don't think so?
No. Next is the physical inventory count, which I do every year with assistance from accounting. We went out to the COF during their annual count, so the store's staff count every single part within the warehouse. We then go in and do a verification count of a percentage of those, just to make sure that what they've counted is what we count. We did that through sheet-to-floor audits, so we took the top 40 total values and the top 40 unit values and counted those. And we also did floor-to-sheet audits, where we took 30 random locations and counted them and then compared them back to what was in the system. So our audit activity accounted for 24% of the total inventory value. And I'm very, very pleased with the results this year. We only found 4 variances, and they were very easily explained. In general, once the store staff are done their count, any variances that they found, they have to write off. This year, we came in at a record low of under $8,000 of write-offs. Just as a comparison, in 2012, we had $93,000. If you convert this to a percentage of our total purchases for the year, it works out to be 1.1%. The industry standard for inventory of this type is 2.5%. In the past, we've run about 1.5, so we have improved year over year, which is it's a phenomenally low rate. When I asked stores staff about what they've done over the past year to get it down to that level, they stated 2 different things. First of all, they were doing more frequent inventory adjustments, so going out and checking some of that inventory that's off-site that they don't have a view of, for example, the piles of aggregate out in the yard, and making those adjustments more frequently. But a larger improvement was getting those other staff in the organization to actually tell them when they're using that. So when a dump truck comes in and picks up a load of aggregate, they're to hand in some paperwork now to let the store staff know to decrease the amount in the system. So then it gets charged to the proper work order, and we're not having to write it off at the end of the year. So kudos to the stores team for implementing that improvement, and the process overall is, again, deemed to be in control. Any questions on that?
Yes, there are. Councillor Fernandez.
Not a question, just a compliment, because I know that we were struggling with this, I think it was last year, it was really, really high. So both to you and to the staff at the COF, that's an incredible reduction. So kudos to them for sure for doing that and recognizing how important it is for them to do that.
Councillor Yanetsky.
Yeah, thank you. And kudos as well for the reduction. It's very strong, very indicative of the good work that's been taking place. But more of a general question that would apply to this particular review and maybe others in general. By having an audit the way you do it and conduct it on a regular basis, I guess, do you think that the employees that are working there, knowing that they're going to be audited, has maybe a fear factor that you coming around and doing this makes the operation more efficient and transparent?
There might be some truth to that, but I would say that just having the processes in place, I think a lot of the write-offs and variances that we were finding in the past were because there were no processes in place to actually relieve the inventory from the system. So now that they've got that process where the other staff are handing in paperwork, they've got a fence around some of the inventory out in the yard, I think those are more of the factors that are making this improve than the fear of me, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay, those are the only questions in that section. We'll go to the next.
All right, the final topic for today is just one confidential investigation, which was brought to me by senior management. And this had to do with a citizen who brought forward a complaint about city staff allegedly damaging city assets on their private property. I did go in and investigate, and I found several pieces of evidence which show that that claim is not sustained by that piece of evidence. Given that this relates to a member of the public and named individuals, I can't go into more detail than that unless you would like to go into caucus.
Any questions on that? Again, if it leads to identification, then we would have to go into caucus. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, and certainly I wasn't planning on doing that. This kind of addresses something I heard this weekend from a couple of residents, and maybe completely unrelated, but maybe you can help me out. A number of times during the winter, when the snowplows do their work. Quite often, boulevards and driveway curbs can get damaged from the snowplows. Is this something that citizens would be complaining about and could create and trigger a confidential investigation like this, or is that just really a part of the way it works, so to speak?
I've never had a complaint about that. I would guess that they would more likely go through the corporate contact center as a complaint. Okay. It's not so much of wrongdoing or intentionally damaging as an offshoot of the process itself. So.
Okay, I was just wondering if that's sort of where it went, if that's how some of these things can create a confidential investigation. But okay.
I think if a citizen had a feeling that someone was doing it intentionally to their property, they had a grievance against them, then it might come through me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if it's through the workings of the snowplow, then it's a different situation. Okay, thanks.
I had actually one of those this past week as well, and it was being referred. Actually, the resident was following up on it himself before I got involved, and hopefully that will be dealt with just in the normal course of things. This one was slightly different than that, I presume. Okay, there are no more questions, and that was for information only. That ends the Audit Committee report, or the agenda as well.